What is a Woman is a documentary starring Matt Walsh and produced by The Daily Wire, which is a conservative news and commentary site that has spent the last couple of years trying to produce original content as an alternative to Hollywood. I'm not really a fan of Matt Walsh. Politically, I'm mostly a libertarian, and Walsh is a social conservative, so I disagree with him on a lot of issues with regards to the role of government and private property rights. What is a Woman is not a neutral journey to answer that question. It is a political documentary with a very specific message. It begins with Matt Walsh stating that he sees a difference between boys and girls, but he is confused by modern-day gender ideology that says gender identity and sex are not the same thing. So he interviews various professionals, including surgeons, pediatricians, professors, and just ordinary people on the street, to get their opinions on what it means to be a woman and challenge those who disagree with his worldview. The documentary uses the question, "What is a woman?" as a launching pad to point out what Walsh sees as flaws in modern gender theory. I thought the documentary overall was pretty interesting. One reason why I wanted to view it is because I did speech and debate in high school and I wasn't very good, but sometimes we would just like to sit around and pretend to philosophize about stuff. And for some reason I got into a conversation with an assistant debate coach about gender, and he asked me, "What is a woman?" And I said, "Well, it's a person with two X chromosomes." And he said, "Well, what about people who are intersex or who have irregular chromosomes?" And I thought, that's interesting. I had never heard of that before, and I had never thought of that before. So in that instance, that was an effective question to challenge my worldview. So it's just really weird how things have changed, because back then in the early 2000s, people were asking the question, "What is a woman?" to deconstruct the gender binary view of the world, and nowadays it is people who have the gender binary worldview who are now asking the question to deconstruct the assumptions of modern gender theory, so I find all that intriguing. The thing about the Daily Wire productions I have seen thus far is that they have good production values. This feels like a real documentary with a real budget behind it. The first half of the documentary, in my opinion, was much more entertaining than the second half. The first half felt a lot like those man or woman on the street segments you see late-night talk show hosts do, where a reporter grabs a microphone and he or she goes around and asks people basic questions like, "Why do we celebrate Thanksgiving?" And someone says, "Is that the day Elvis died?" Or, something silly like that, and then we, the audience, are supposed to laugh at the absurd answers people give. I very much appreciate dry humor delivered with a straight face, and Walsh does that very well. For example, someone tells Walsh, "A man has no right to define what a woman is." And Walsh asks, "Are you a cat?" "No." "Can you tell me what a cat is?" And then the person just walks away in frustration, like, that was funny. The second half of the documentary takes a much more serious tone, and it changes from being a lighthearted critique of modern gender theory and turns into a discussion of children receiving surgeries and hormone treatments. The lighthearted, sarcastic portions of the documentary are much more entertaining than the last half. During the last half hour, I drifted off just because he does a lot of interviews with people making the same point repeatedly, so that became tedious. Walsh also does a little too much patting himself on the back towards the end. There's a scene where he says, "I'm done asking questions." And then we see him as a political activist giving speeches at school board meetings, advertising his children's book, and going on Dr. Phil. It was a little thick on the self-promotion. Would I recommend this movie? If you agree with the argument, then you will probably love it. If you disagree with the argument, then you will hate it. This is a topic that makes a lot of people very angry on both ends of the political spectrum. If you voted Bush Cheney in 2000, you would probably hate Fahrenheit 9/11 regardless of how well made it is. But if you voted Gore Lieberman, then you would love it. It's the same thing here, so no, I can't just blatantly say, "This is a good documentary and you must see it." If you don't support the mission of Matt Walsh and the Daily Wire and you don't want to financially support them by watching the whole documentary, then you can watch some of the free clips that they put on YouTube.